Test, test. Test, test. I don't see a separate moderator link. Can everyone hear me? I can't hear anyone else. All right, it looks like I have an audio problem. Hello, hello?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. Sorry for the mix-up. We're kind of having a technical issue. I'm trying to resolve it in some minutes. So thank you all for your patience and also your understanding. And I'll be adding everybody that will be speaking and also the moderator to the stream, so we can get started in like 3 minutes. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Hi, Emma. How are you? I think you're mute. I can hear you. Okay.
I cannot hear Emma.
Yeah, me too. Okay. So hi, Desire, and everyone.
Okay. Can anyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Bang, 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 bang. Fantastic.
So sorry,
Oh, we
guys.
heard you, Emma. We just heard you, Emma.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me too?
Yes, we heard you.
Looks good.
All right,
Pronounce your name first. Pronounce your name first, Tafadali, please.
Me? Yeah, Desiree.
Desiree.
Yes.
Desiree.
Absolutely. So French speaking.
There's some echo. Who's? Okay, everybody has their video on except for our moderator.
I do have video on. I'm seeing me.
Your video is not coming up.
We are not seeing you.
Yeah.
That's strange. Well, let's sort out the technical issues over the next 10 minutes, and then we'll get this right.
Yeah, sure.
So what is the so what needs to happen? I see video of me, but I suppose that might be a turn server thing.
You can log off and join in again. Maybe it will work.
Okay, I'll try that.
So where are you all joining in from? I'm currently in Nigeria, Abuja, Nigeria. So sorry I didn't introduce myself. My name is Arome Ibrahim. I'm here to support the conference, and I'm also helping Kume with the technical setup for StreamYard.
I am in Kenya. Emma, we're not on the live stream yet. It still lists Kume as being on the live stream. Oh, we see you now, Jeff. There you go.
All right. Oh, you see me. Oh, great. Okay, good. Very good.
Yeah, I mean, Nairobi, Kenya. I'm at home. I just had a son 5 days ago. He was on my chest just a few hours ago.
That's great.
So if you see me yawning, don't feel like I'm bored. I'm tired.
Yeah, totally understand. Thank you. Thank you for that, Professor Solo.
Maybe I'll tell you. Yeah. So I am currently based in Sweden. I am Central African and Rwandan, and yeah, I mean, I didn't have a son yesterday, so I think they'll be in good shape to keep up with the conversation as along it goes. But yeah, I mean, we'll be discussing more in the next few minutes.
Very good, Desiree. Sorry that the timing didn't work for the call yesterday, but did you have any thoughts on the comments that we on the topics that we discussed?
I mean, most of them are very timely and interesting. I just wanted to add a couple of items that I think are relevant for the African continent in general, and specifically East Africa. When it comes to, for example, everyone is talking about NFTs at the moment. So I think that'll be quite interesting to just cover this topic a little bit. And at the same time, seeing also how to use technology for adding real value to the end user, the citizen. Also, there is the AFCTA, African Free Trade Agreement, that we'll be probably talking about, and some other aspects. So just trying to make it a little bit more specific and focused so that we go beyond the hype and see how really to start walking the talk.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'd also be interested to hear your thoughts, since you mentioned NFTs. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the real motivations underlying NFTs, which from what I can tell, well, I'm interested. What do you think?
I'm trying to be as balanced as possible, but and not really to share the depth of my thoughts most of the time. But truth being told, I mean, technologically, it's beautiful. It's to have managed to create such a programmatical solution for selling art over the borders and transferring ownership of this token in a non-fungible way is quite incredible. But at the same time, I remember back in 2016, I was in a co-working space. Back then, I was actually working in co-working space in London, and there were some people back then who were building an art platform that will be built on top of blockchain. And afterward, I started to also develop some skills around AI, and I realized that the best combination of both, so AI and blockchain, to, for example, create the art and selling on this distributed network will be the best way forward. So there is nothing really new about the concept of NFTs. What is new though is that nowadays you can buy a tweet for $2 million. So in terms of the value to the user, I think it's a little bit overstated, I would say. But then how do we go beyond the hype and selling cat memes online to really trying to help the, for example, the African creative industry to sell their art, their craft beyond the borders, so that we're not limited by the financial boundaries, we're not limited by the visas, and our art won't be just found in European American museum, but actually could be sold directly from, in the peer-to-peer network. So I'm just trying to break down all the hypes and trying to go straight to the point.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
that's actually one. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to ask, are we live yet, or no?
I'm not
I
sure.
can check YouTube. We are live, actually.
We are. Okay,
Yes.
Great. Okay, well then, great. Well, then, in that case, maybe we should start with a round of introductions, so that we can, so that everyone knows who we are. So maybe starting with you, Desiree.
Yes, so my name is Desiree Nzangu. I am here on behalf of the Africa Blockchain Institute, for which I'm acting as an advisor on a voluntary basis. My motivation is to try to connect the different dots in Rwanda specifically, but also East African region, to create something that goes beyond, distributed project on specific needs. Like there are some projects around land registry, some other around single source of identity and so on. But everything is working in silos. So through a Pan-African approach, I'm trying to see how we can connect the dots. My full-time job is working as a consultant in the space tech industry, and I'm an engineer by training. and blockchain enthusiast for some years now.
Thank you, Desiree. Professor Solo?
Yes, Professor Solomon Darnell. I am doing my best to be a blockchain pillar in Kenya. I'm part of the whole blockchain ecosystem. I hang out with young people too often. I've been writing software for 25 years. I have a few blockchain patents and publications. And I'm working with iLab Africa Research Center. And one of the things we do some blockchain work. And then I also have a company on the side that's doing blockchain work. So I'm looking from in every direction, connecting to as many people as I can in the area to try to figure out how to make blockchain a reality here, because I believe the technology can really help our countries. Kenya, Rwanda, Ethiopia can very much help these specific countries.
Thank you, Professor Solo. And Emma?
Hi, everybody. My name is Emma Landrio. I'm originally Canadian, but currently based in London. I'm a blockchain consultant with Everest, which is an NTT data company, and I'm part of the blockchain for banking practice. So for those of you who don't know, Everest is a multinational consultancy. It was acquired by NTT data. And we focus in strategic solutions, development and maintenance of tech applications, and outsourcing with a global portfolio of cross-sectoral clients. The blockchain for banking practice specifically specializes in producing distributed ledger-driven solutions for financial services and banking clients. Since its inception, we've developed a reference technology based on the Interledger protocol, tested a variety of proof of concepts, and pushed many of them to the production space. And then we've also been exploring all sorts of use cases for industry segments, resulting in securing top technology partners and the creation of many internal assets for client benefits. So today, I guess I'll be bringing more of the institutional point of view to the panel, and I'm looking forward to engaging with you all.
All right, thank you so much. So I think that we're waiting for Endemo. So perhaps we can begin. So in the meantime, so what I really wanted to discuss first was the current challenges. So what do you see as the current challenges that we're seeing towards that are involved in payments and that are involved in trade currently facing the East Africa region, and what do you see as the critical touch points here? Would someone like to jump in? Sure, go ahead, Professor Solo.
Professor Solo, you can start. I'll be just following you.
Okay. From what I've seen while I've been in this country, while I've been in Kenya, you have a lot of handshaking, at least for international trade, and this handshaking is very complex. It involves a lot of egos, and let me give you a smaller example. Let's say I'm driving down the road, Dalgong Road in Nairobi, and it's the end of the month, and there's a police officer shaping traffic on the street. He sees that I have a nice car and I'm well dressed, and he stops me and he tells me I performed some type of traffic infraction. Now we can end that transaction very quickly by putting 1,000 bob in my hand and giving him a handshake. Or we could talk. Boss, I wasn't doing anything wrong. Are you telling me I don't know how to do my job? And then next thing you know, things escalate. There's an impasse. We're holding up traffic. I might have to go to a police station. Right? So there are two very different ways to go about business in this part of the world, it seems. And if countries aren't aligned in how they want to go about business, then there's going to be lots of friction and lots of trouble. And that's what we see in international trade, and that's what we see in banking. For instance, in Kenya in 2016, the CEO of what do we call it, Central Bank Kenya, he released a note saying that Bitcoin was illegal in Kenya. Bitcoin was fraudulent. It wasn't any good, right? And now they're reconsidering because of all the different things that are happening in the world. So I'm seeing a lot of old thinking. I'm seeing a lot of clinging to power. I'm seeing a lot of people comfortable doing things the old way. And as especially Kenya and Rwanda, these countries, the youth population very strongly outweighs the, let's say, baby boomer population. And in order for these countries to grow properly, we have to make sure things are smoother for the youth. You know, I'm almost 40, so I feel like I need to be working right now to make sure things are easier for the 30-year-olds and the 20-year-olds, and for my children, because I want them to live in a fantastic world where things are transparent and people aren't always cheating you and trying to get money out of you for random reasons. So those are some of the issues I've seen.
So thanks, Professor Solo. Desiree, what are your reactions?
I mean, I have actually kind of a story that will go more or less in the same direction, which is back in 2016 when I kind of fell into the blockchain hole. I was at hackathon where there was Andreas Antonopoulos, actually, one of the Bitcoin priests, kind of. And what amazed me back then was that Bitcoin was still the price of a cup of coffee, and you could actually already buy it back then in one of the startup place I was in, and there was not the hype that we have today. But back then, I remember I read the book that he handed over to us after this hackathon. That was about bank. I mean, it was about the electronic. I mean, the digital money and the concept of banking the unbanked. Since then, I've been hearing constantly banking the unbanked from many Western organization. I don't like the term, but basically it's all the Bitcoin actors, developers, companies active in Europe, US, I mean, America, Asia, and so on. But the point is that when we talk about banking the unbanked, we're not talking about banking unbanked in developed world. We're talking about banking the unbanked in developing world. So basically the continent I'm coming from and Asia. But truth being told, when we look at our financial system and banks, now I'm very comfortable with the KYC, know your customer. But back then I was not really comfortable with this because my profile, my background, my name, I mean, everything that is about me is quite not helping me much when it comes to fitting the box of the KYC. But when I compare to the way we're doing many steps forward in Africa, the way, for example, if you want to buy a house, you're gonna pay up to 19% of interest on your house. While at the moment in Europe and the whole world, we're talking about negative interest rate. This is not reaching my continent. We don't have negative rate when it comes to buying a house, when it comes to buying a car, when it comes to buying all the basic goods. You're not even sure to get actually a loan. So Bitcoin and every other cryptocurrencies was 5-10 years ago and is today still what we market as banking the unbanked. But the fact is that the way it is developed and the way it is deployed and the whole value chain hasn't really reached yet the citizen beyond having us as some of the biggest customer of the Binance, Coinbase, and all the centralized exchange platform. We are very big consumer of cryptos on the continent, even in countries where it's officially illegal. But we still haven't really gotten all the value of it, because it doesn't matter how many bitcoins you have if you cannot really cash it in the bank in Uganda or in Kenya or in Rwanda or elsewhere. It doesn't matter if you're on Ethereum or Cardano or Tron or whatever, because at the end of the day, the visa limitation, the boundaries within continent and within our own countries makes that you're just going to be virtually rich. You're not going to make a big change in your life. You're not going to make a big change in your community. And that's why I'm trying to see how we can have technology developed as locally as possible so that we go beyond the hype of just holding the cryptos and starting really building the underlying technology that will power the Web 3.0.
So Desiree, you mentioned you mentioned a lot there, and there are two different and what I see are two separate issues inside that message, right? One is the idea of being able to transact with people that you want to transact with, right, and having this kind of digital mechanism as a way to enable you to do that transaction. But you also mentioned something else. You also mentioned this concept of banking the unbanked, and it sounded like you were describing banking services and banking and and access to loans, and perhaps other kinds of financial products. And what I want to ask you, Desiree, is what do you see about the connections between these two worlds? Because whereas it seems that one could ask the sort of devil's advocate question, well, if this just sounds like yes, access to payments and the ability to make payments sounds like something that helps financial inclusion, because we want people to be able to pay the people that they want. But this access to banking services, if it's driven by this idea that we're going to be watching your transactions, doesn't that sound like colonialism to you? Doesn't that sound like we'll only lend to you if we can watch everything you do?
I used to think this way. A little bit like Professor Solo. I'm also reaching slowly but surely 40s. I'm not here. I'm not there yet, but I'm getting there, and I can see my mindset changing and being a little bit more mature and wise. 2015-16 has been kind of a life-changing period in my life. I went from working for one of the most powerful companies in the world to being to start my own business and to fall in the blockchain trap and so on. So the way I was seeing the world back then was very much into libertarian, a bit radical. I've softened up since, and I understand that whether we want it or not, we need banks. We need a financial system. The way it is currently built has its flaws, and we hope that the situation that we're living in for now 1 year and a half is going to help to make it a little bit more virtuous. But we need this support system that enables that if I lose my coin, I'm not going to be losing it all because someone just decided to close the central exchange and to run away in Canary Island. So we need some kind of system that at least check that if I lose my assets, I'm not going to be completely left without anything. Whether the system is built on the traditional system as it is today, I don't think so. And that's why we see the trend with the CFI versus DeFi, centralized finance and decentralized finance. I think the whole world in the next 5-10 years will turn into DeFi. But what I've seen also, the trends is that all the revolutionary and libertarian people that pushed for Bitcoin adoption in the early years have now sold their technology toward traditional players, because at the end of the day, we all need to pay our rents, we need to put the food on the table. Some people maybe would like to go from 1 million to 10 billion. That's a choice. And all the PR that we put in the initial movement was a cypherpunk movement. It was cypherpunk. There was no PR. There was no marketing. It was really libertarian. Now we need to find some kind of combination that on one side leverage the powerful technology that is native, digital native, that has beautiful UX and UI, that is put on the blockchain, but with also the ethical aspect, the value-driven aspect. And long story short, to close it here, we need an ecosystem approach. I had to work in Rwanda to understand the concept of an ecosystem. We cannot take things as a silo and think that they'll be standing on their own without connection with each other. At the end of the day, it's all about economy and politics. If we don't understand these basics, we can just build all the technology we want. It will remain for specific purpose. It's not going to change the life of the people.
So it sounds like what you're saying, Desiree, is that we need some kind of institutional infrastructure, or at least institutional support for a decentralized infrastructure or something
Yes.
that allows people to benefit from this method for transacting with each other without necessarily creating the risks that are associated with bringing in these technologies on the wrong terms. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Central bank digital currencies, I think, is a good way forward. I would maybe encourage them to dare a bit more in really utilizing the way the technology was built in. So, of course, there will be a middleman. That's the way it is. But it's okay. I can trust the government. I can trust the higher authorities, because currently, thanks to these higher authorities, the whole world is not collapsing due to the pandemic. So this is something that is kind of a wake-up call. But we need them to also be a little bit more digital, to be a bit more tech-savvy, because currently it's not enough.
So thank you, Desiree. So Emma, do you have any reactions to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you're looking at discussing the institutional side of digital currencies versus the kind of DeFi side of digital currencies, there are always some really key trade-offs, particularly in terms of control. And this applies to a CBDC or any type of institutional digital currency. And then in comparison, in contrast to DeFi, I mean, when you're looking at the institutional side, it does prompt, of course, the question, do we trust this entity? Because there's actually a centralized control over that specific blockchain or that specific system. And they will have rules designed to engage on the network and have some degree of control over it. So on the bright side, it means that there's not as much room for malicious actors because you will have KYC or know your customer, know your transaction systems in place. But do we trust whoever is holding this information to not start profiling based on transactions or based on how you're engaging with your financial activity? And also, as Desiree kind of mentioned, does this giving up a bit of control on this blockchain provide you with, or on the system, right? It could be any kind of really DLT or even a centralized system, but on this institutional currency, does it give us any protection from the volatility of assets? Because on the other side, DeFi, trust is inherent when it's built on a public blockchain, when you have all of your different players who all have an equal stake in the game, but you are, by gaining that lack of control, you don't have any of that institutional level of security. And then on the same side, it goes back into looking at the trade-offs between participants, right? Who is going to be on the CBDC system? Well, yes, you will have retail users and everyday people being able to engage with mobile wallets, but at the same time, it's going to be your entities, your banks, your governments, and the financial ecosystem participants who are all going to have access to this information. So I think it's just a matter of understanding what the best system is for the specific economy or country in space. And then, of course, acknowledging that there's also questions around ability for internet connectivity and energy use, right? In DeFi systems, you're usually looking at proof of work and proof of stake consensus, whereas you might have a lighter system on the CBDC side where it's tailor-made consensus, or you're operating with smart contracts. There's questions around offline transactions. There's questions around identity. And again, going back to trust. So I'm kind of a broken record here, but I think ultimately it depends how much trust you have in the entities and if that's the way to go, or if you want to look at developing out DeFi systems and public blockchains, but knowing that you might not have that same level of security behind you.
So Emma, one of the things you mentioned earlier was an interoperability ledger. What were you speaking to? Please say what that is again.
Yeah, of course. So just in terms of interoperability, actually, this is something that Everest has had quite a big hand in. We've developed a tool called we've developed the Java implementation of the Interledger protocol. It's then been donated to the Hyperledger Foundation as Hyperledger Quilt. Essentially, the idea of the whole project and what it does is enables cross-blockchain communication and atomic swaps. So in a partnership with Everest, NT's Data, and Ripple, we've developed this tool that essentially will connect all ledgers that today are siloed and disconnected and allow to send value from someone on one network to somebody on another network, even if those connections have not yet exist. Because today, right now, they're manual, they're complex, and they're inefficient to do. So that's kind of an overview of what Interledger is, and then we can jump into it a little bit more in some of the use cases if you want.
Go ahead, Professor.
Okay, cool. So now that we're speaking about the central bank digital currencies and we're speaking about interledger communication and siloed ledgers, I've never heard the word silo used with decentralized ledgers before, but that's okay. It seems, I mean, just for me, I would definitely be using a blend of both. You know, I would have Bitcoin, I would have Ethereum, I'd be on Cardano, I'd be on some Chinese blockchains. And then let's say Kenya comes up with a CBDC, I would definitely start using that. And if we can use Hyperledger Quilt in order to connect these other public blockchains to this CBDC, this private blockchain that's controlled by a country, I would do that. And, diversify my bonds or, what do they call these? Just, my money. my digital money.
Yes.
Because I can't just completely trust. I maybe my good brother Desiree has matured more than me in certain ways. I trust a lot of things, but I really don't trust a lot of leadership of different countries. Not fully, right? There always needs to be an option where I can be completely in control of a thing if it's supposedly mine. And then I should have an option to be able to buy in into what the country does and participate like a normal citizen, right? And that's one of the beauties of blockchain, and that's one of the beauties of this interledger protocol, I believe.
So,
Actually, Professor, can I just jump in and just quickly ask about it? Thanks for the kind word, by the way. And I think that we're kind of in the same track in terms of wisdom, because there is I mean, there are many things you have that I don't, but specifically one is that you are actually a lot more technical than I am in terms of developing blockchain technologies. I'm not a 20 years experienced developer. I do a little bit of Solidity, a bit of, I mean, all the classical technologies, and whatever that most people at entry level can do. But I'm not yet to the level to create and build my own blockchain solution. I use what is already out there and I put together in comprehensive way. But on the side, I'm also a user-centered design advocate and trainer, and I'm really advocating for customer and user value. So beyond our small ecosystem of tech savvy and knowledgeable people. Now we've seen the hype on Bitcoin, not because people trust Bitcoin. I mean, 99% of the people who are buying Bitcoin nowadays, they don't know much about cryptocurrencies. They only know that Bitcoin is at about $60,000. They hope that it is going to go up to 100,000. Soon we'll be hearing that all the big techs, all of their CEOs, have, actually maybe they already have Bitcoin. We are very happy that Tesla and Elon Musk are buying Bitcoin, but I mean, to see deeply, how is it good for the end user? How having the value of the crypto going that high is going to help the unbanked? Someone in my family who cannot really maybe afford to pay tuition for the education of their kids to buy a 60,000 Bitcoin currency. It's no good for the end user, for the unbanked that everyone is pitching about. It's good only for those who are going to holding it and making money on top of interest. We're very happy to hear about Bitcoin turning into ETF, which is a trading tool that makes it easy for the stock market to trade on it. We are happy to hear about. I mean, people are going to keep on making money on top of it. But long story short, we need to make the tech to kind of break down the concepts so that the end user will see value in using it. And for that, and you've acknowledged that the user experience is key. We need to simplify the technology to the way that at the end of the day, people don't care what is the backend. They don't care whether it's on distributed ledger of technology or on the outdated central database that our banking systems are using. They just need to have it providing, to give them value for it. So definitely, I agree with you. Keeping a level of trustless system is key. So you don't rely on a centralized authority, but at the same time, for the user experience, we need to make the current system that 99% of the whole humanity are using, leveraging on the blockchain while keeping the same user interface and experience. So the tech savvy will use combination of both, as you do, as I probably do, but most people will go towards what is frictionless. And for that, if we are in the game and can influence that trends, then we'll make it happen. Otherwise, it will remain weirdo techie solution for the decades to come.
So thank you for that, Desiree. And I think I might just indulge me with a bit of a wonkish divergence into finance for a second. Dimitrios Simokos of the University of Oxford had written had written an article several years back on why we have one currency in one place, and really there is an efficiency gain, he argued, for having one agreed mechanism for payment. And this is a very intuitive thing, right? I spend money in pound sterling because that's what everyone else is using near me. I would not want to be requiring them to take a large bid offer spread in order to convert whatever they have to whatever currency I'm going to use. So there's a massive sort of interest in having one unified kind of currency. And I would ask first whether this might pose a challenge for Professor Solo's vision of having many different currencies at the retail level at the same time. I also might suggest that this question of this question of what it means to invest in something, is this going to be something with risk premium? Normally, and I'm a former portfolio manager, and I would not want to include anything in my portfolio that didn't have a risk premium, because otherwise, what is it that I'm getting? I mean, I could imagine investing in euros, but if the pound appreciates against the euro, then my investment in euros will fail. And any world in which the euro appreciates against the pound is ipso facto a world in which the pound depreciates against the euro. So it's a zero-sum game. So there's no risk premium there. So when will we start to see instruments be denominated, real securities and investments be denominated in these currencies? Is this what we need in order to see these things drive forward? Not the Bitcoin per se, but what we're actually using the Bitcoin to do. So I leave that to you.
And if I can add one consideration to the question before we pass it over to Prof. Solo for what I'm sure will be a very insightful answer, is also, what does that mean for a currency substitution, right? Because if you are starting to adopt foreign, let's say, central bank digital currencies, what are the benefits of currency substitution in specific economies, whether that's thinking of business cycles or less volatile currencies, but also what are the really big risks, right, of financial instability? So I think that's another really important point on Jeff's question.
Yeah, so I don't know as much as Jeff about risk premiums. But as far as having those different cryptocurrencies being used in different areas, right now I'm thinking about things that's still at ground level. Bitcoin, I guess, started in 2009, 2011 or so, and it's now become quite popular. Now we have these other technologies that are coming up and these other currencies that are coming up. There are a lot that are there, like Dogecoin or Dogecoin, that are utterly useless and have no purpose whatsoever. But then there are others that are being made by other African entrepreneurs, like the Wive token by Melanin Solar. Right? So they're trying to use solar energy and Raspberry Pis to mine tokens in rural parts of Kenya, so that people who are not having so much access to central banks or those other currencies, they can share electricity and do things like use internet so that their children can learn remotely instead of having to go to Nairobi or some other larger city center, right? Without all that travel and everything. So that's simplifying and solving a problem on the ground. Now, what we know throughout history is these types of things evolve as needed, right? So if we have 10 different currencies in an area, whatever currency ends up having the best user interface interactions with everybody else, whichever one is the most usable becomes the one that swallows up the others, and it's just used everywhere. Like M-Pesa in Kenya. We have Airtel money in Kenya. However, that proliferation of Airtel money is minuscule compared to M-Pesa because M-Pesa is so useful. But before we get to the M-Pesa level, and M-Pesa was very much ahead of its time, we're going to have these other multiple small currencies doing these different things. And it's really going to be based on, whichever one grows up is going to be based on its utility and its, what do we call this, user experience.
Thank you, Professor Solo. Desiree, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, I mean, just like Professor Solo, I'm not as good as you in terms of the portfolio management, but I know a little bit about trades and currencies. Like many people, I continuously try to develop my skills around blockchain, and I follow the training for blockchain for accountant. And there I did learn actually what is money. Many people build cryptocurrencies but don't really know what is money. And for example, the fact that we talk about the NFTs as being non-fungible token, but one of the core features of Bitcoin or many cryptocurrencies is actually being fungible, because money is fungible, divisible, portable, and some other features that makes it what it is. Fungible, meaning that it can actually being transferred from one owner to another, exchanged without losing its value on one hand. Uh, so we are kind of trying to chase different direction at once without really understanding the basics of economics, trading, and those who have this knowledge and expertise, so trader, stock market experts, then do not really need to know the depth of the technology of blockchain to actually start making money out of it. So the real value, I believe, if it's about the cryptocurrency, is to know how money works and then to use whatever technologies that is out there to then start making profit if that's the end goal. If it's about blockchain as the underlying technology, then crypto is kind of a whole beast as a whole. So there is a lot we can talk about when it comes to blockchain, for logistics, for single source of identity, for education, for mining, electricity. I love the example given by Professor Solo actually, and also by Emma. If we think in the future, the smart grid will be a combination of you become the owner, the producer of your electricity, and you will be leveraging green electricity sources, so sunlight, wind, biomass, whatever. And what if you can do that while mining some coin at the same time? You actually pay back your loan, you pay back your, you can distribute it to your community. So there are beautiful, virtuous example we can give it there. But to just really focus on the point of the money and the currency aspect, I will take just a pragmatic approach. And as actually, again, Andreas said a while back, there will be many cryptocurrencies. And the further the Bitcoin and cryptos will become mainstream, the more cryptocurrencies will come up. Most of them will die quickly in a painful death, because they won't even have time actually to get a user mass that is critical. They'll just disappear. And the biggest one will remain. So what we can try to focus on is how to make the traditional system that we're in to leverage on the underlying technologies to maybe provide to the user, the citizen, a trustless system that will actually play for them. Because currently we're facing a crisis of democracy where we're not trusting our authorities anymore. Well, if you want to disrupt yourself before being disrupted, then implement central a CBDC that is leveraging on a trustless system without the middleman, that is distributed, that is censorship resistant, that is also attack resistance, and all the different attributes that cryptos is having, while providing also the asset that the traditional money has, which is, I don't believe in this scarcity. The scarcity is not playing for the user, it's playing for those who hold them, the Bitcoin. The non-fungibility, I don't believe in this either, because it's not helping for me who wants to be able to exchange my Cardano, my Ethereum, my Tron, my whatever. So let's find some kind of way that takes both the best of both worlds and making it quick, adding the current, the user experience, the customer experience, the marketing, and everything else. Because currently we're still very much working in silos, and only those that are already in the ecosystem with an edge, because they've been there for so long. So the miners, I would say, are making profit of it.
So it sounds, Desiree, like what you're advocating for is perhaps a central bank digital currency that respects the rights of the owners and the abilities for them to transact and operate in a way that's under their control. Is that fair to say?
For me, for my personal opinion, yes, but also I'm, again, a very specific case. I am doing so knowing that I'm ready and willing to lose what I'm investing in that system if it happens. Not everyone can afford this. I'm okay if I lose everything that I'm investing in this CBDC centralized system. It'll be the same risk as if I'm losing the coins that I have in centralized exchange. And I emphasize on the word centralized because we are putting our decentralized token on centralized exchanges, which as per se is a paradox, but we think that it's okay.
Right. Well, I imagine that some of those risks you have even with fiat currencies anyway. So a CBDC would be perhaps the same in that respect. Emma, do you think this is possible? Do you think that we can achieve what Desiree is hoping for?
I mean, I think it's amazing. That said, I think from a central bank point of view, it's really hard to mitigate risk when you're, engaging and collaborating with currencies that are not pegged to a fiat currency, right? They're pegged to supply and demand at the end of the day. And sure, it's fine with Bitcoin at $1 trillion market cap. You're right. At this point, it's probably too big to fail. But with a massive drop, imagine if you're, engaging with certain parts of your country's reserves, or even just investing with your fiat currency, and then there's a huge drop in Bitcoin. What kind of impacts will that have on the financial stability and the currency stability of the economy? It's questionable. Now, is it technically feasible with a tool like Hyperledger Quilt? It is, right? Because you can connect traditional ledgers, you can connect any ILP-enabled ledger with Bitcoin, with Ethereum, with XRP blockchain. So it's certainly technically feasible, and I think that interconnectivity is really, really important. But do I see the banks, the central banks, at least this is in my opinion, do I see the central banks, readily collaborating with some of these cryptocurrencies? At least not in the immediate future. But I think that where we do see something interesting, where you've mentioned the use case for all of these, for Y, for example, and some of these really interesting DeFi-driven solutions is actually being able, the value will be connecting cryptocurrencies and CBDCs into some of these financial inclusion solutions and making sure that all of these ledgers can interconnect so that all sorts of new tools are now available to the region. I think is, that's kind of an interesting point, but do I see it happening in terms of central bank collaboration and crypto collaboration? Not yet, unfortunately.
So Emma, can you describe who the actors would be in the clearing mechanism between these ledgers and what they would do?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on the actual application. So the IOP is an open source protocol, right? So they have basically two really simple primitives. The first is prepare, so putting the funds on hold, and then committing, which is settling the funds via cryptographic functions. However, there's also implementations of ILP from all sorts of different players. The one I will mention is the Moduloop Foundation, which has been created essentially or mostly funded by the Gates Foundation. And they've developed the core infrastructure for all sorts of different service providers to actually build on, which has the account-based lookup services. It has your clearing and settlement and connections for API connections for all sorts of different services on the ground in local economies. And they've developed this tool where you have all of this core infrastructure developed in a software development kit that can be downloaded in an open source fashion, and then have different organizations who are actually on the ground in localities or in the markets that they're operating with, building on top of these solutions. And I think that in terms, that kind of streamlines all of this amazing DeFi and even in some cases, institutional solution development for delivering services to the underbanked without actually having to really go through and understand on a highly technical level to be able to design clearing and settlement and connectivity in between the different ledgers.
So what do you see as the so when you say that it might be a challenge to envision this kind of use of digital currency by central banks, or this use of a network that has transparency by central banks, like what is the tussle here? And what I'm really interested to explore is what constraints are facing the government operators of these kinds of systems, or what constraints are facing governments that might want them not to have transparency, or what might they do to promote transparency? Where do we see what do we lose when we move from a centralized to a peer-to-peer system, or vice versa, and who stands to benefit from these different choices that we have to make?
Yeah, I think that one of the big points, so I kind of explained a little bit about the control, right? The control side of things. You lose control if you're going from to a decentralized system where you get to engage on a public blockchain with all of these different pseudonymous actors. But then on the other side, if you are implementing an institutional or a public permissioned or even a private blockchain, there's going to be a central entity that has control, and it's just a matter of what they want to do with that information and who those entities are. So I kind of mentioned that, but there's a couple other trade-offs. I mean, first is, generally speaking, volatility of the asset, because in my point of view, central banks will mostly be engaging with assets that are pegged to fiat currencies, whereas in DeFi systems, like Wide, for example, you might be looking at these specific tokens, which again are going to be more volatile because they're just pegged to supply and demand and not to the fiat currency. There's also identity and visibility is another key factor. So on the institutional side or on the private or public permissioned blockchain, there is going to be identifying factors that are somewhat used to allow participants on the network. Whereas in the DeFi or in the decentralized infrastructure, it's completely pseudonymous given public key infrastructure, right? So there's only a public key that's relating to the player. So that means that there is more room for malicious actors. But at the same time, there's less control to then profile you based on how you're engaging and how you're acting with your money, right? And the different financial activities that you're doing. And then I think on the other side, there's accessibility, which is the biggest point, in my opinion, particularly where there are a lot of underbanked people, because generally speaking, on the institutional side, even if they're leveraging mobile devices or new devices that can be used, you do need to have a bank account, right? And that can be problematic in underbanked situations, where on DeFi applications, there's been all sorts of different innovations where you can just be leveraging a mobile wallet, or maybe you're even cashing out via telco, M-Pesa, via courier service, right? I know Everest has worked on all sorts of different projects, and one of the things that came out of a development lab was looking at how could you just cash out through a courier service. So there's so much more increased accessibility on the DeFi side as well. So I think those are some of the things that some of the key trade-offs that you have in terms of institutional versus DeFi. And then on the side of central bank digital currencies, I mean, there's just a breadth of different challenges. Jeff, you've done tons of research in the space. You know that there's so many questions around system design, around the type of digital currencies, around the type of devices, around whether it will be interest-bearing or not. So there's still a lot of discovery to do on that side as well.
So thank you for that, Emma. I think that there are several different questions emerging here, right? One is the question of what it is that we need to do to enable individual users of the currency to hold money outside of accounts, even if they do have accounts. And then the second question is, can we really operate a system with private sector actors, say perhaps private sector banks, that is decentralized in as much as these actors who are running the system are not all electing one leader or having an account with one authority, but are still overseen by regulators. Do we see that there is a chance to for collaboration or cooperation between the public and private sector to make this kind of infrastructure possible? And I'm interested in Professor Solo's view, especially, and also Desiree's view, especially with respect to what you're seeing on the ground in East Africa.
Jeff, please ask that question again. We've gotten an amazing expert who just joined as part of the panel.
Welcome.
Hello, Batange.
Welcome, Batange.
Sorry, when I didn't get in, I went to do other things, but I'm sorry.
Welcome, Batange. Do you think you might be able to say a few words about yourself? I imagine you probably need no introduction, but maybe if you could just say a few words.
Yes, my name is Batange Ndemo. I teach at the University of Nairobi in the School of Business, and I've been in the ICT sector for quite some time. So that's how I got invited here.
Thank you for that. Batange, so the question that we're asking is, given the situation the situation, the political situation, the economic situation in East Africa right now, what are the challenges to the public and private sector working together, or the public sector working together to support a decentralized kind of infrastructure or a transparent kind of infrastructure that serves the interest of its users with respect to payments?
Yes, I think the discourse is mixed, meaning that um, made a presentation in Uganda. The president was supportive. He opened the conference. The central government, the governor of central bank was opposed to the whole issue of the emerging situation and said they needed more time to learn. In Kenya, we have the Ministry of Communication trying to move forward with the policies around cryptography, but the central bank wants to see what happens before they can move forward. We had wanted a sandbox, a regulatory sandbox to begin to test. But if you look at the Capital Markets Authority, which is in the stock market, we already have a regulatory sandbox there. So it's a mixed both of things. Some countries have not even started to look at the policies around the emerging tech, which is very scary given the fact that the first industrial revolution went without Africa taking advantage of it. Second, third, and now the fourth, which is, in my view, the last chance for Africa to participate with the rest of the world and hopefully begin to leapfrog some areas that are still lagging.
Thank you for that, Bitange. Professor Solo, what, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I believe it's absolutely necessary for private industry and government to have what do we call this, ledgers together, central bank digital currencies and everything else. I think it's going to be necessary for them to do several things together where even normal citizens have insight and can see these transactions, so that everybody can trust what everybody else is doing, so that the government can ensure that these companies who are making a lot of profit off of its citizens will actually pay the things they owe, and that they're not doing things that go against the ideals of the country or the ideals of the government and the ideals of the citizens. Now, another thing is, one thing governments do, if they have a front-facing technology, they're going to have a similar technology that only they have to deal with, right? So if you have normal internet through telcos and different providers in the country, the government is going to have a separate internet so they can be secure, so they can do the things that they need to do. That's always going to take place. So it won't completely take away the power of the governments to do the things they need to do, but it will give citizens and it will give companies better insight and more trust into different systems.
So, Professor Solo, it sounds like what you're saying is that at some level, we need the citizens need to believe that the infrastructure is working as advertised and that the operators of the infrastructure aren't changing the rules as they go. So it sounds like we need a mechanism for creating trust in the system operators while still allowing the individuals to have the privacy that they need when they make their transactions. So how are we going to get both?
That's where we need to do the research, isn't it? Unfortunately. Please
May
continue.
I jump in? Yes, I'm apologies for jumping in, but actually I think that we already have this system that is applied in some, at least, other countries. Game theory. I discovered it actually a couple of years ago when I went back to school. And the fact is that if we use game theory concepts and techniques, and we analyze that the market we're in is, as we call, a non-cooperative game. It's a game where participants have nothing to lose by changing the status quo. We apply these technologies and try to reach what we call a Nash equilibrium. Long story short, there are techniques, methods that have been applied for policymaking, for everything that has been done for the past 50, 60 years and so on in the current traditional economical system we're in. So if we use what works and apply that to tomorrow's economy, what we call, the token economy, Web 3.0, and so on. What works will help increasing the trust that citizens have, maybe not on government itself, and that's their choice, but on the system as per se. Disclosure, I worked for government some years ago, which is why I trust even more government today. But fact is that we cannot expect everyone to do so. And those who don't, then we have already technologies in place and methodologies that goes beyond the tech that can actually help this reward-based system, incentivizing people. It's about thinking of what can they get by using this alternative instead of that one. How would they move from the traditional status quo centralized system we're having to a more decentralized, trustless, but actually because it's trustless, will be even more trusted by the person who's in that network. And just to clarify, it exists. It's just about doing it. And one last thing that I wanted to say before leaving the floor to my colleagues is I grew up in a French-speaking country on West Africa. And even though it's about East Africa here, I want to highlight a problematic that very few are aware of, which is the franc CFA, the CFA franc, that was pegged on the French franc and so on. I mean, I'm not going to get into the debate here, but the fact is that we're going to move now to something called the ECO, which is pegged on the euro. But how about now that there are such big changes, using these global trends and technologies that is becoming more mature to leverage a decentralized currency, decentralized system, so that instead of replacing the currency that you were pegged on before to another currency that you're going to be tied on, and as it happened in 1992, if there is a problem with the euro or an inflation or the dollar collapse, the whole world is going to feel the pain. Because back then the CFA franc lost 50% of its value in 92 from one day to another. Actually, my father back then lost half of his salary due to that. So I'm trying to think of a future where Africa, our leaders, knowledgeable people in this panel, can try to influence, lobby, so that if we do a big move, which we are currently doing, we'll be using the latest technologies and methodologies that are already out there. China, Turkey, India, Russia, all of these, growing powers are already working on their own central bank digital currencies. Whether it is a real decentralized system will come over time. What makes a decentralized system powerful is its capacity to be attack resistant. So if they want the next generation currency system to be attack resistant and therefore enable the trust that the citizen wants, there is just no other way than trying to make it as close to Bitcoin as it is at the moment, but without all the flaws.
Thank you, Desiree. Bitange, do you have any thoughts on this?
The reason why I am almost an evangelist in this space is because this blockchain and others cryptography, I think, was created for Africa to help Africa come out of its many problems. I say this with confidence that if, for example, you see the entire cobalt comes from the Congo, if we created an asset backed cryptocurrency based on cobalt, we would change the lives of the people in Zaire. If we created an asset backed crypto for Botswana based on diamonds, we will change the lives of everybody in that space. Now, if you look at the utility of the Bitcoin, nobody understands it. Nothing backs it, not gold, nothing. And Africa has all these resources that we can give comfort to everybody who has our coin, that we can change the fortunes for Africa. But a number of things have to happen to be able to do it more productively for the countries. And so what the series is talking about, I love it, that we get more thinkers around this space, we could change the poverty situation in Africa.
So it sounds like what you're saying, Batangue, and correct me if this is wrong. It sounds like what you're saying is that tokenization could be a powerful tool for reducing supply chain inefficiencies that lead to an exploitation of the producers of some of these commodity resources. Is that right?
Yes, and we could get financing for much needed infrastructure. We could leverage on the power sources in the Congo to supply power throughout Africa, which is green energy. There is a lot to be done leveraging these technologies.
Thank you for that, Batangue. Does anyone have any comments on that? I think maybe Emma or Desiree. Emma?
Maybe Emma first.
My biggest comment, I think, on the last few points that everyone brought up was that, especially from an institutional point of view, I mean, I think the way to, I agree, tokenization is the way to go. And when we look at what that means for central banks, it really would look like a tokenized or a token-based central bank digital currency, right? Where you're transacting based on the wallet identifiers and not accounts, so that you can transact in a more decentralized fashion where the central authorities aren't necessarily sure who these transactions are linked to. And on top of that, it's a less complex way and a more scalable way to run the entire central bank retail digital currency. So to echo everybody, I think that if you are concerned about privacy preservation, tokenization is the way to go. And I will pass it on to Desiree.
Thank you, Emma. Just last few words. I wanted to mention smart contract because if we break down the different pieces of blockchain technologies, and if there were, I would say, 2-3 things that people would gain by training themselves on, I would highly recommend then focus on what powers the old blockchain system, which is a smart contract, basically this handshake, digital handshake that you do between two counterparts when you do a transaction. It can be from when you do an administrative transaction, sending administrative document or legal system. I'm trying to think of all the spots and areas of inefficiencies where they will benefit by implementing blockchain technologies. To make it simple and communicate in terms that people will understand, we have to be plain and talk simply, but not simpler. Smart contracts, game theory, are, I think, 2 things where if you need to teach yourself these skills, you can power the whole structure. It's like an atom. It's like a molecule. You go down to the atom, then to the electron, the protons, then you go down to the muon and all the different pieces. You don't need to know all the big molecule. You can just focus on what will make a difference. And last but not least, I wanted to also mention beyond the distributed, the CBDC and all different use, capacity building. So let's train at scale people on our continent to be able, maybe not to all being developer, maybe not to all being strategist, but at least to know a little bit pieces here and there. So that next time there'll be some MOUs, NDAs, and so on that'll be signed, there'll be more of us in the decision making. So that over time, when Africa by 2050 will reach 2.5 billion people and will become the next half of the century, the markets where everyone will be looking at, we'll be already having experts, technologists, strategists who can implement and influence the token economy of tomorrow.
Thank you, Desiree. So now, one of the things that Emma mentioned was the idea that CBDC could be used to address some of these supply chain challenges, and what I wanted to ask Professor Solo, whether you think that this is something that we could do, or whether there will be challenges in actually trusting the central governments and the regulatory apparatus that they would need to build to make that possible. What would be the challenges, and how are we going to overcome them?
I believe Batangue would know the challenges a little better than me. He deals with these big players in Kenya a lot more than I do. But from my point of view, some of the big challenges are going to be ensuring that the people who are over implementing the system are connecting to the right people to build the system, and going to the right groups and bringing in enough stakeholders so that as they develop, as they build, they do it in a way that ends up being trustworthy, right? Now we already trust these central currencies or these central banks to manage the currency of the country in the first place. So they can just go from the perspective of we already control the money. Now we're just going to make it digital. However, in order to bring in the youth, like Professor Ndemo was saying, and in order to do what Desiree was saying, make sure it's more the youth are shareholders in this and stakeholders. More education has to be done. So it's really just generally education, I believe.
Okay, thank you, Professor Solo. Bitange, do you have anything to add to that?
There's a lot of challenges. If you see what is happening in developed world, is that they are working to develop computing capability to deal with the future because of the amount of data that we are going to see out of the new technologies that are coming. We must work, collaborate in Africa to create an environment where we have that capability. Not just talking about them, even we need to begin early enough in order to understand what needs to be done. What Desiree is talking about is.
Yep. Thank you, Bitange. Okay, so I think that we have some
Yeah,
questions about.
sorry.
Sorry, go ahead,
Went
Bitange.
off. Went off.
Continue. Sorry.
If you see what China, the politics behind China CBDC is that the use of Swift, Swift Global exposed virtually every country, and the debate about anti-money laundering to the extent that some of the developing countries are harassing citizens. Kenya, which had begun to improve on the bank population. Now, if you go with 1 million to the bank genuinely from your investments, the central bank would need almost 20 letters to prove that this was anti-money laundering, this was money laundering or stuff. Africa is just beginning to get people into banking sector. The introduction of such laws like AML, which actually Swift can tell you who is doing AML, but somebody locally here who has worked, who has been keeping money in the mattress, now wants to bring it to the bank, and then you hound them to court for anti-money laundering. I think we need to move quickly into the organization, and hopefully we can bring more data protection for the citizens and grow the economies.
So thank you, Bitange. So it sounds like what you're saying is that this prevailing sort of pressure from groups like the Financial Action Task Force and perhaps those who want everyone to use the SWIFT system are actually leading to a tussle between governments and their citizens within Africa because basically they're pressuring citizens to provide more information about their transactions. Is that so?
That is true, and you know, we are coming from a situation where most people used to keep money in their homes and beginning to talk about something they don't even understand where it's coming from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Counterproductive. Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like there are lots of questions, right? Because the question of transparency is transparency for whom, and whether people want to have self-determination about their own decisions. And if we're moving to digital platforms, then the question of who gets to do the monitoring is very different than in a world of cash-based physical transfers.
Exactly.
So okay, so what kinds of technologies will we need? So I know that we're going to need to wrap up and go to Q&A very shortly, but I know that I think there's been a bit of a discussion about the kind of technology that we might need in the future in order to protect ourselves from the kind of panopticon effect, while also protecting the system itself from not working as advertised because of the emerging threats in the technical space, such as large data centers and quantum computing and so on. So what do people think are the big challenges
I think
and
if
opportunities?
you look at what has happened is that AI has taken off completely. I mean, countries are talking about how to compete with AI in the age of AI. And even locally, where the solutions you are seeing, the ones that are scaling most are those that are powered with AI. Look, for example, lending on mobile platforms, data analytics, about credit and stuff. These are moving so fast that even the regulators don't understand what to do. Instead, I wrote an article to complain that regulators should not interfere at the moment. We should be using regulatory sandboxes to see how it would pan out. That's how we can create better innovations. But most regulators are saying we must stop this. We have to stop this from going forward. It is a defeatist way of doing things. We don't know much about what AI would bring in its finality.
Yeah. I guess one question is who gets to see the data, and who gets to do the learning. So what do others think?
So at Strathmore, we're actually teaching a master's in data science and analytics. That's going to start very, very soon. We want to equip Kenyans, young Kenyans, and those who are, very technically inclined, with the ability to understand data, to use artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms on the data, to get insights, and to, then get hired by the government and private industry to manage and help manage some of these issues, right? So we're going to need those technologies, and then we're going to need these entrepreneurial innovations. I know of a company, Kotani Pay. They allow people to, remit payments on the blockchain using USSD. So now this is one of these very user-centered design applications where the true unbanked, the people who aren't going to go to the bank for anything, can transfer money with a feature phone, with a phone that doesn't even have a animated screen, where you can't even watch movies on your phone or everything, which, is weird because I've been doing that since 2005 or something. But people today can't do that. And they're building applications so even those people can participate in these digital currencies and take advantage of these digital currencies. So things like data science, things like AI, and these types of innovations that help the lowest common denominator.
Thank you, Professor Solo. And it sounds like what you're saying is that people will be able to use these technologies for their own benefit, right? Like one of the big challenges with AI and data science in general is that the parties who are doing the learning and are running the algorithms and are looking at the data are basically taking advantage of the people who are using the system. And it sounds like what you're saying is that maybe we can empower people, and part of empowerment is allowing them to use these feature phones that are not as privacy invasive as these more sophisticated phones, to conduct these ordinary transactions on their terms. Is that fair?
It's quite fair, Jeff.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that, Professor Solo. Emma, Desiree, maybe. Yeah.
Emma first.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think when we were talking about threats, I mean, it kind of came up a little bit in the back end here, but it's just the idea of the threat that quantum has to blockchain and DLTs. And in my opinion, that's one of the biggest long-term threats, because quantum computing stands to break asymmetric and symmetric cryptography, which is what blockchains are made up of, right? We're using public key infrastructure, asymmetric cryptography, to basically transact with one another and actually move the data by identifying one another with our private keys. And we're using hashing for the data that's actually being committed through the ledger, which is symmetric cryptography. And Shor's and Grover's algorithms stand to break both of those. Not today and not tomorrow, but in 20 years from now, right? So and NIST is doing a lot of work to try and find the right proposals to move forward with quantum proofing blockchains, but it does remain a really big crack, because really it would reverse the immutability of blockchains, because new blocks would be able to be created in between the existing blocks on the ledger, which I'm not sure how technical the audience is, but essentially that's how each block in the chain is connected with one another. It's through these cryptographic hashes. So it could break the integrity of a lot of systems. And so we're looking at ways to quantum proof these blockchains, of course, through things like zero knowledge proofs, through the Chaumian method, and then also through crypto agility, which is just building, especially in the enterprise space where applications last for 20 years in some cases without ever being really played around with, is building these private keys in agile fashion. So particularly, what if we had to build onto the private key? What if the private key was actually two private keys? Or looking at other ways to build systems in a quantum proof fashion today. And the Bitcoin blockchain, this has been something that's come to prominence, and they're looking at actually building on private keys as one option, or even changing the way we transact by saying that you would only use a public key one time, because by the time a quantum computer could break the encryption of the public key, the transaction would already be committed. So you might have a new public key and a new wallet every single time that you're transacting. So there's some really interesting ways that Ethereum and R3 Corda and all sorts of other blockchain protocols and platforms and players in the industry are looking at mitigating this issue. But it is an issue that needs to be mitigated, because it does stand to break the integrity ultimately of what these amazing trust-driven technologies are. I'll pass over the floor to Desiree if you have anything to add on this.
Thanks,
I'm not going to dive in much into the technical aspect. You basically said it all. I'll just put things into perspective. I think currently the most powerful quantum computers have about 50 to 70 quantum bits, or the qubits, which are basically the brain of the machine, to break the current financial industry cryptid with Shor algorithm. The SHA-256 will need to implement something called the Shor algorithm, which is a quantum computer algorithm that requires up to 1 million qubits, and this won't happen overnight. But at the same time, we need to start from now. Remember back in 2000, for those who were already born back then, the shift from 1999 to 2000. It's been dramatic. It has caused a lot of collapse. And we need to think it this way. We have 10 to 20 years to prepare the technological ecosystem, but also the whole society into this shift. And while we're at it, maybe my way of thinking is a bit radical, but how about shifting also from the traditional cloud computing system we're using into maybe a little bit more edge computing, a bit more frontier innovation? Because the biggest player in the quantum race at the moment are also those who own the quantum computing resources that will be building tomorrow's token economy. So you're just handing over your dependency to one centralized technology to another centralized technology. Because at the end of the day, the code is important, the application is important, but where the power lies is in the infrastructure, even maybe the satellites. So we've got to dig deeper. And for that, I advocate to bring in more human scientists, designers, philosophers, because if tomorrow's world is built by technologies, it'll be a bit like the internet boom in the 90s to 2000. Great technologies, but 20 years after, we realize that we have a lot more disparities, a lot more hatred, a lot more, the society as a whole is not as virtuous as it used to be. It cannot be built just by technologists. So that's what I'm advocating for.
Thanks, Desiree. Okay, so I've been instructed that it's going to be time for us to wrap up shortly. So I think, do we have any Q&A from the audience? Okay, so one question: what research is needed for this DCD? I'm not sure what is meant by DCD. Does anyone have a view on this?
I think they meant CBDC maybe.
CBDC. Okay. So yeah. Would one of you like to jump in? Go ahead, Professor Solo.
I think
Oh,
these are just terminologies. Because During COVID, the president ordered that we use we stop using cash in Kenya, and nobody complained, and everybody was happy with digital money. And CBDC is actually digital money uh, from the central bank. We do it all the time. We withdraw from our accounts and put in our M-Pesa account. I don't think a country like Kenya would have any problem at all switching to CBDC. But the research that we need to continuously show the benefits of the productivity improvement out of this, the savings, because governments spend billions of dollars manufacturing paper money, then the transparency that would come with it. We need to do a lot of research, how much it curtails corruption. There is so much that needs to be done. But in terms of implementation, anybody can do it. And I think every country should now begin to think how to provide digital education for every citizen. I'm saying this because in COVID, we got some the women who sell vegetables come to us. They said, "What is it that we can do?" And we offered a very quick training on how to leverage existing social media platforms, take pictures, upload, send to your customer. Then customers began to order their supplies. Then we trained taxi motorcyclists to drop. We trained them on how to use Google Maps, and we completed an entire e-commerce business by changing, by repurposing social media, and they began to work. The conclusion out of that is that virtually every citizen now must be ICT first, and that's the role of government to make sure that everybody understands it as we transition to the next level of currencies.
So thank you for that, Batanga. So it sounds like what you're saying when you said that the governments had forbidden people or discouraged people from using cash. Did the people know what they were giving up when they used these when they moved to these electronic payments methods in terms of their privacy and control?
Well, the issue of privacy, having been in government, I'll be cheating you that there is one government in this world that doesn't know what everybody is doing in their part of the world. Whether the Western governments or developing countries, the first interest is to know thy customer, KYC, know your customer. But
Right.
there is a lot of convenience that comes with. If I am not doing any crime, why should I worry about this? That's how I look at it. But of course, we need a lot more data protection, citizen data protection, than I say what I'm saying.
Well, data protection isn't quite the same as privacy, right? Because with data protection generally applies to making sure that data are not misused once they've been collected, but you can't really prove, you can never verify, a user can never verify that their data aren't being used for parallel construction or in other ways. They can't verify that things have been deleted. They can't verify that that data have not been used as advertised. And you really can't trust what you can't verify, right? And this is one of the questions that I think comes up. You mentioned this line of argumentation. If you have nothing to hide, then you have nothing to fear. Well, that's Well, that line of reasoning was precisely used by Joe Goebbels in the Second World War, and I'm sure we're familiar with what happened there. So I wanted to ask Professor Solo, did you have something to add to that?
No, not specifically. I'm just thinking about some other things that work in concert and taking in all the information that I'm getting right now.
Any other thoughts? Oh, we have another question. How fresh graduated approach towards cryptocurrency and being benefited? Thank you. So I think the question is how what kind of approach should we take to implementing cryptocurrency or using digital currencies? Like what are your views on the right way forward?
Maybe I can just quickly give my personal experience, then I'll let it over to Emma for
education. I'm a professor, so I always say education. At iLab Africa Strathmore University, we give training on blockchain and data science. So try to do one of our online training courses, but also make sure we have good user-centered design so people know what they're doing and know what they're getting into, and build things like Otani Pay so that the lowest common so that crypto works for the lowest common denominator. We don't want to leave people out.
Makes sense. Thank you, Professor Solo. Emma, do you have something to add? Oh, sorry, Desiree?
Oh, Emma first. Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so just to be specific about education, for those of you who might not have a chance to study at Professor Solo University,
I can't even see
Desiree, can you hear me?
Coming up on my screen.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Desiree.
I can hear. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Just to be specific, nowadays education is available online for free. You can train yourself on going through some online courses from Professor Solo University or from other MOOCs available out there. Learn the basics and then increase the complexity of what you're teaching yourself. Find groups, meetups, communities. In Rwanda, for example, we created some blockchain association. Then in East Africa, there is a blockchain association. And on the African level, we're also trying to do that. So connect the dots. You don't have to wait to get your degree to start teaching yourself the basics. Don't wait too long. Use the network to connect to existing test beds, prototype ongoing. Find what current public authorities are implementing and try to see how you can bring value to this. In parallel on cryptocurrency, install the apps that are available out there for free. Try to see how it works. Don't spend your money on it if you're not willing and ready to lose it, but understand how the system works so that when the time will come, you'll be able yourself to build on top of it. Don't fall in love with the technology nor the codes. It's gonna change anyway. So until we have a stable infrastructure, just learn as much as you can, focus on where there is value for you, and then keep on going. Never stop learning.
Thank you, Desiree. Emma, did you have something to add?
Just one more comment on that, because I think that what everyone has said has hit it exactly on the nose. It's all about education, and a degree is an investment, but education is virtually free because there's so much information out there on the internet. But what I wanted to add was that also don't forget that cryptocurrencies and digital currencies are just one of the many applications of blockchain and distributed ledger. So even, I know today we were talking specifically about currencies, but for us as enterprise blockchain consultants, we're always looking at different cases around operational efficiency, KYC, around trade finance. There's really cool asset tracking and supply chain use cases and self-sovereign identity. There's so many different areas in which this technology can be applied that explore, right? And go find some of the use cases that are interesting to you, whether that's from social impact, whether that's from trade or one of the other areas, because it's limitless and we're innovating. It's a brand new technology, and this industry is only going to continue to grow and to innovate and to see new applications of the technology.
Thank you, Emma. Bitange, do you have any thoughts on this?
No, actually, they have said it. I encourage, there is so much resource that you don't need to ask, just to get to know and a lot of undergraduates who have graduated spend time looking for jobs, but you go online, you find there's so many jobs on data analytics and other things. And these are things you can get free courses from several platforms.
Okay, thank you for that, Batange. Okay, so so maybe if we can just go around with our very last last words from everyone. Maybe Professor Solo first.
All right, thank you. Let's keep doing more research. I'm glad I met these panelists today. I've met Batange several times. I don't know if he knows me yet, but hopefully he does now. Um, I'm always going to be speaking to the innovators of blockchain in this country. Again, I'm going to bring up the company Kotani Pay, and I'm going to bring up the company Melanin Solar. They have a Wive token. Kotani Pay uses an Icon token. These are innovators in blockchain in Kenya, in Nairobi specifically, and everyone please look up their platforms.
Thank you, Professor Solo. Desiree?
I'll be just summing up the keywords that I mentioned earlier: smart contracts, game theory, token economy, Web 3.0. Think of this, look into it, teach yourself the basics. Don't fall in love with the technology. Create public, free communities for self-learning, self-teaching, and about the how to, and also thinking beyond the current way things are done, how to impact and to contribute to the local ecosystem of your continent, your country specifically. This is about East Africa events, but let's not forget also about West Africa, because a lot of things are happening specifically driven by Kenya and also other East African countries. But I believe that if we can help each other and influence other regions that might be blocked by language, currencies, and so on, there is a lot of brain matter out there that I think together we can get further. So I know I sound a bit idealistic, but without this idealism, I wouldn't be passionate, and without the passion, I wouldn't be speaking the way I do.
Thank you, Desiree. That is that's good to hear. And Emma?
Yeah, I think to echo everybody, I mean, blockchain, DLT, and really just emerging technologies as a whole are a vehicle for progress, whether that's innovating public, private, or third sector. And, you know, it's important to go play with some of those open source tools like Hyperledger Quilt, among many others, and play and see what you can build, because nobody has a better skill set to build solutions than people who are on the ground and understand the unique challenges of the region. So please, feel free to reach out if you're looking for any other thought leadership. Everest does a lot in this space as well, and we'll be happy to share some resources with you and play around.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Emma. Batange? What do you
Yeah,
think?
I want to say that God has been great and given us a lot of problems. That any one of these we change becomes a great entrepreneurial opportunity. We have a lot of resources in Africa. We need to figure out how to leverage those resources and create more robust cryptocurrencies than what we are seeing at the moment. Let us not just focus on these technologies like the GSAs and look beyond. Blockchain is going to require a lot of energy. We have a lot of green energy from the Congos to whatnot. I think we need to look at the enabling environment which we can provide for, and not begin to think that other countries can develop the resources for us to function seamlessly.
Thank you for that, Batange. That is these are wise words. Okay, well, this brings us to the end of our panel. Thank you all for your contributions, and thank you also for the to the audience for your great questions. And with that, I hand it over to Kume. Thank you so much.